to Leading for Life Stories, Season 3. I'm Bob Judson, I'm the host for this podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you here joining me. Regardless of whether you're a seasoned listener who's been with me since the beginning, or whether you've just dropped in for the occasional episode, I really hope you enjoy the mix of content that I provide, the personal stories, the thematic episodes, and the guests that I have on the show. And I hope you find it all interesting and at least some of it useful. And without further ado, let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back. My guest this week is Jeff Nielsen. Jeff is a former US Air Force pilot. He flew the C-141 Starlifter. Then he went to Delta Airlines, had a long career, 35-year career in Delta Airlines. And more recently, he's the host of the Airline Pilot Guy show, a podcast that particularly focuses on all things aviation with a crew of people on board with him doing that. And it's a fantastic podcast. I'll put all the details in the show notes for this episode because it's really one that if you're interested in aviation, both news and amusing stories and just experiences from some of the people that are on it, I think you'll find it fun and an interesting show to listen to. As you'll rapidly discover listening to this episode, Jeff and I have a lot in common. We got on really well. We talk an awful lot about flying and the flying systems that he went through and that I went through. And we got on so well that we didn't actually get through half the things I thought we were going to get to. So I suspect at some point we'll definitely be having a part 2 to this episode because there's lots in there. I think it's classic that Jeff kind of viewed it initially as, I'm not really sure I've got the things you want for the podcast, but boy does he have that. He really does have loads of leadership experience, of course, and lots of great thoughts around the way that actually you could do this well if you're leading teams of people. And leading, obviously, a captain on an airliner is leading a team of people without any stretch of the imagination. So it's a great episode. It's lots of fun, and particularly if you're interested in the flying side of life, I think you'll enjoy some of the stuff that's in here as well. But either way, lots of leadership tips too. So without further ado, off we go. Hey Jeff, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you on the podcast. I'm a really big fan of the Airline Pilot Guy show, and as a fellow podcaster, it's always good to have these kind of conversations. So thank you very much for joining, and I'm sure we're going to have a great time.
Oh, you're very welcome. And coincidentally, I'm a big fan of Leading for Life podcast as well, and all your work, Bob.
You're too kind. Thank you very much. I think we'll talk a lot about the podcast world because you've been doing it for a long time. And just before we started recording, we were just chatting about that you effectively were doing podcasts before podcasts, in terms of before anyone thought they were a thing. And I think that's fascinating to see how that journey's gone. But equally, you've had an amazing career in aviation. I mean, a military pilot to start off with in the US Air Force, then obviously in the airline world for a long time. And now, even retired, still firmly connected to what you're doing with your show. Just to start us off, it would be really good just to get a bit more of a kind of walkthrough of that life. What you've done over the years, and just to kind of set the listeners straight on who you are and what you've been doing.
Okay, well, do we have like 4 or 5, 6 hours?
we have a fair amount of time, but
okay. Well, and Bob knows this because he listens to my show that once you get me going, sometimes it's really difficult to shut me up. So please feel free. Don't hesitate. Don't be afraid to say, Jeff, you know what? This is not an overnight show. We need to keep this moving here. So. Anyway, I guess we could go back. I was born in, I would say though, not long after I was born, when I was a little kid, growing up in Southern California, the Los Angeles, Long Beach area, Seal Beach, I remember looking up into the sky and thinking, yeah, man, that is cool. Seeing these airplanes go by, because there's a lot of airplanes flying over your head in Southern California, very busy airspace. And I thought that would be cool to be able to fly one of those things. And then taking family and friends to the airport with my family and smelling I don't know if you feel this way, but almost everybody that I know who is involved in aviation or is an aviation enthusiast would agree that when you go to the airport and you smell the burnt jet fuel, it just has a certain, I don't know. It's like they could make a cologne of it, I think, and I'd buy it. It's just such a wonderful thing. It's intoxicating. And probably toxic too, but intoxicating for sure.
Yeah, literally, I should imagine.
Yeah, but so smelling that and watching the air crews walking, in the concourses, with their suitcase. Of course, back then, they were carrying their suitcases. They didn't have, wheels on them. That was something that actually happened while I was actively in the beginning part of my airline career. The wheels on the the roller bags, that kind of thing. Anyway, so I just thought the glamorous lifestyle of an airline pilot would be something that would be fun to do, and so that kind of was the little seed that was implanted in me. And fast forward into my middle school, junior high school years. At a very early age, I came from a family of musicians, sort of church musicians, choir directors and organists and that kind of thing. And so I took piano lessons at a very early age. So I learned a lot about music and about singing, and then I ended up playing trumpet, and that became my passion. And I really, even though I still loved the idea of flying airplanes at some point, I wasn't necessarily kind of thinking that this would be something that would be a profession for me. It would be just something that would be fun to do, maybe if I could afford it. Of course, back, when you're young, you don't really think about the affordability and the economics of things
Sure.
until you become an older person, and then you go, oh, okay, yeah, this
It's
stuff's
not
not
free.
free. I need to do something. I have to work because my parents aren't independently wealthy, so that means I got to work and pay for things. And but anyway, so I really thought, especially in the heart of my high school education, because I was so involved in playing the trumpet in concert bands, marching bands, jazz bands. That was my favorite, the jazz band. I even played in like a little play group, musical orchestra kind of thing for like the musicals. They'd give us like $10 per performance or whatever, and if you had a nice run, I mean that could be $100. And for somebody my age in the '70s, that was a lot of money.
Sure.
It was good spending money. So it was fun. I mean, literally, music was my life. And I really thought that that's what I was going to do for a living. And then, as I just mentioned, when I got to the point where I realized that, oh, but if you really want to fly airplanes, and I started looking into how much that was going to cost, I went, oh, okay. Well, so even though I want to be a studio musician in the music world, of course, if you know anything about music, Bob, not very many people get to do that kind of job in the music world. That's like very high end. You got to really, really be the best of the best, and you have to probably know somebody in the industry, that kind
I
of
think
thing,
that
to
that's
to
true
get
for
in.
lots of things, isn't it? That's like sports. I
Yeah.
mean, it's very interesting. I think for youngsters these days, where certainly this country, this side of the Atlantic, we see people saying their career ambition is to be a celebrity. I mean, that
Mm.
was never a career choice when I was at school.
Well, yeah. Do you
I
go
just
to
think,
college to learn how to be a
yeah, there isn't a
celebrity?
kind of a course you can do to be a celebrity, but it's we I
Yeah.
was talking about this with someone else recently about golf, or I just using it as a sort of an example as sport, where if you think of the millions of people playing golf across the world, a lot of them are very, very good golfers, but the number that actually make any serious money out of it is minute. I mean, they're really, really tiny
Yes.
numbers. So yeah, I think you're right. It's very easy. Music would be another great example of that. That
Hmm.
setting your sights on something that is actually, if you crack it, wonderful. But it's a really, really challenging world to get the breaks to get into to do it seriously, isn't it?
It is. I just discovered here near where I live a jazz club, live jazz, 3, 4 nights a week, over the weekend, basically long weekend. And the people that are playing there and performing there are not like the people that you would ever really know anything about unless you knew the local scene. These these people are amazingly talented, and I'm thinking that just kind of further illustrates like you just have to be at the right place at the right time. Everybody has that amazing, not everybody, but a lot of people have that amazing talent out there. But anyway, getting off track. So I said, well, I'm probably going to be a band director if I go this route, which would be very rewarding. However, it's not very, the compensation is not as great as it could be if I were alternatively flying airliners for an airline. And so I thought, Okay. I really do want to do both. So why don't I shift gears and get into aviation and do that for a living, and then do music on the side. Actually, I should say there was a little bit of a speed bump there when I got to my senior year in high school. I realized, and I didn't come from a military background. Well, my dad was in the Korean conflict, but he was serving his 4 years in Germany, so nowhere near the Korean conflict. But that was the only exposure I had at all, and was really no exposure at all to military life. And so, what I knew about the military and what it would be like to be in the military was what I saw in movies, and like living in the barracks and eating in the mess hall, and you know, not a very accurate uh, reality for what life in the military would be. I like to say to people, and you could probably agree with this, that it's very much like, of course, your job, flying high performance fighters and that kind of thing, a little bit different, but a lot of the things that you do in the military, it's like a regular job, except sometimes people are shooting at you. So it's a little bit of a difference. But so off I go, and to college, basically thinking, okay, forget about trying to be an airline pilot because I don't want to go into the military. I just don't want to do that. I'm thinking, completely, or my concept or understanding of what that would be like was completely skewed. So off I go into college to be an engineer, and I was struggling with that. I wasn't all that. I realized that there were a lot of people out there much smarter than I. And I during that couple of years, I realized that this is not really something. I'm trying to imagine what life would be like doing this kind of occupation, and I just couldn't see it. What I could see was I could see myself up in that airplane flying through the skies. And I thought, okay, it's time to really have a come to Jesus kind of moment. And it's like, maybe you need to do what you need to do to get where you want to go. And what that meant for me was, okay, I could switch to an easier curriculum, aviation management, which at the time at Auburn University in Alabama was a kind of a hybrid thing, kind of engineering light and business light with an emphasis on aviation related courses, which was just right, perfect for me. Um, and I thought a lot of the people, or not, I thought a lot of the people in that curriculum were in the ROTC program, the Reserve Officer Training Corps program here in the US, where you basically take courses and learn leadership and other skills to be an officer in the military. And you could get a pilot slot, maybe. That's the thing that prevented me from actually enrolling in the ROTC program at Auburn, is that my friends who I'm going to class with, great guys, they would have a pilot slot, and then next week they lost their pilot slot for whatever reason, and then a couple of weeks later they have it back again, and I'm thinking, I don't want to do this if it means that I'm not going to have a pilot slot. So I don't want to, so I did my own research, found out that at the time I'm graduating in 1981, the military services here in the US are going to be really hurting for pilots because of so many of them leaving for the airlines. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. I'll go to Officer Training School, OTS is what the Air Force called it back then. And took the tests. My recruiter said, hey, you did really well. He said, really well in Navigator and the Navigator portion. And he said, I'm thinking we should submit you as a pilot or Navigator candidate. And I went, nobody had warned me about this, Bob, but I just something new. My intuition just told me, I don't think that's a good idea. So I said, tell you what, put me in as a pilot candidate. If they turn me down, then let's have a talk and see what we want to do, where we want to go from there. So I get my pilot slot, and I graduate from aviation management at Auburn University. They did have something called the professional flight option, which is some GA flying, and you get some of your ratings and that kind of thing. But I'm thinking, if I'm going to go into the military is going to train me. They're going to pay me, actually. I'm not going to have to pay a darn thing, so I'm not going to spend any more money. And I've spent really very, very little money on my training thus far. So, yeah, I didn't do the professional flight option. I graduated in 1981, and then 2 weeks after I graduated, I was on a bus to Maxwell Air Force Base and raising my hand and, pledging my life for the defense of my country and defending the Constitution and all that. And then on an airplane down to San Antonio for officer training school. So because I went into the Air Force and I have a pilot slot, supposedly, if I watch myself and don't mess anything up. However, I didn't have a private pilot certificate or a private pilot license, most people like to call it. And yes, interesting thing here in the US, we don't get licenses, we get certificates, but everybody says we have a license. In fact, I say I have a license. Anyway, that's a tangent that we didn't really need to go off on. Sorry. So the Air Force is thinking we're going to spend millions of dollars on you in a full year of basic and advanced jet training. We want to make sure that you actually can do this. So they set us up in this program called the Flight Screening Program Officer Trainee Fishpot. And so before officer training school starts, we get on a school bus in the morning. They give us flight suits, and we look like we're, at an undergraduate pilot training base going through pilot training. The same thing, stand up, emergency procedures, sir, yes, sir, standing at attention, all that stuff. And then the airplane that they were using to screen you was basically a Cessna 172. T-41, I think the designation, the military designation. And basically they just took you up, taught you some maneuvers, and basically wanted to see if you could solo the airplane, do a few patterns and not kill yourself. And so I did that. And I think, I don't know, maybe 12 hours total, so it was really, really quick. Purposely so, because they wanted to make sure that you could handle the pressure. And you had a hand and eye coordination kind of thing. So we did that, went through officer training school. 3 months later, 90-day wonder, they call us. I was a second lieutenant. And then a short period after that, I was already starting undergraduate pilot training in Columbus, Mississippi. Went through that program, and I was pretty consistent with my performance when I was at pilot training. I was not the kid in the class that got the excellence on the check rides. I got goods, but I don't think I ever fared a ride or hooked or unsatisfactory ride during my entire year, both in the T-37 basic jet trainer and the T-38 advanced jet trainer. And I didn't realize it at the time because I really thought for sure that I was going to be coming back as an instructor because there were certain everything you do there, I'm sure it's the same in the RAF. Everything you do is graded, evaluated. They put stress on you just to really see if you can handle all this. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I know a lot of people loved it. I did not. But because of my consistency through the whole program, and even though I was fighter attack reconnaissance qualified, FARD, they call it, I was also IP qualified, and because of that, I thought for sure. And everybody was telling me, Jeff, you're coming back. You're going to be flying the T-37 in the squadron over here, and you're going to be in this flight, blah, blah, blah.
Do you have in the
out,
system that you can actually go straight back as an instructor at the end of?
Yes.
Yeah, we have the same thing. We called it creamed off QFIs, call it creamed off qualified flying instructors. And you can do it either to basic flying or advanced flying, where you'll go in and your initial tour, instead of going forward to the front line of whatever persuasion, you just go back and instruct. So it's exactly the same principle, yeah. Which is equally. I mean, it's real mixed views. Some people love it. Some people kind of go, no, I don't want to do that. But yeah, it's a very similar process.
Yeah, and it's probably the similar way there as it is here, where you really don't have an assignment yet. If you're a FAPE, first assignment instructor pilot, and we just call it FAPE, you have to continue to work very, very hard. And it's great for the military because these people are busting their arses out there, flying as much as they can and doing as best they can, which I'm sure they would do anyway, but they're still vying for that F-15, F-16, A-10, whatever airplane it is they want to fly after. and it's brilliant actually for the military to take advantage of this, this thing. But so my student squadron commander took me aside right before assignment night. And we have what do they call it? A dream sheet, I think,
Hmm.
of
Yeah,
like,
we have the same.
your choices. Yeah. And he goes, "Hey Jeff," he said, what do you have on your dream sheet?" And I said, "Well, it doesn't matter. I'm coming back, to the T-37 squadron." And he goes, "No." He said, what is it you'd want to fly if you didn't have to come back and be an instructor?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to fly the C-141B Starlifter made by Lockheed, transport, four-engine, high-wing, T-tail transport." And the reason for that is that I thought at that time to get to the airlines, which was my ultimate goal, uh, I thought that you'd have to have that kind of experience, that crew, big airplane kind of experience. I later learned that that wasn't true at all. But anyway, so he said to me, "Oh, okay, great." He said, "Yeah, me too." I said, "I'll see you out there in about a year." And I went, "What?" And then he goes, "Go back to your flying squadron and do stand at whatever." And so I ended up getting those C-141B Starlifter because of my consistency, not because I was the top dog in my class, but I was in the top 10%. They call it distinguished graduate. And we started off with about 60 some odd students in my class, and we ended up graduating, I think, 33. So it was a quite high attrition, both self-eliminated, kind of a deal, or people that just couldn't hack
Yeah, very
the
similar
intensity.
actually, because we would have been in not too dissimilar time frames, and we had exactly that in those days. It was a very high failure rate. I mean, my basic flying training course, where for us there were only fast jet slots actually. So if you didn't make fast jet standard, then you were going basically either navigator or somewhere else on a ground branch or out.
Uh,
And
yeah,
and we had 18 of us started the course and 9 of us finished. So yeah, it was exactly
yeah,
pretty brutal.
yeah. About 50% attrition. Yeah, it was, yeah, about pretty close to that with my class as well. So yeah, so I was, luckily I got to be a distinguished graduate. I was probably the number three guy. I don't know. I never did find out exactly where I was, but I'm pretty sure I know the other two guys, and they're really, really good pilots. So I'm thinking I'm probably number three, but that's okay. I'm I'm happy to be able to not have to stay here in Columbus,
Well, you got your
Mississippi,
first
and be an
choice. I mean,
instructor
that's
pilot.
a good result, right? It's a
Yeah.
yeah, it's very good.
So anyway, I went to follow-on training to learn how to fly the 141 in Oklahoma, and then went out to the West Coast in Northern California, Travis Air Force Base. Got all checked out on that. And I had the opportunity to go to survival training, escape and evasion and all that kind of fun stuff. Oh man, when I was there, I was sick, and they were talking about pulling me out, like helicoptering me out because it was in the Cascade Mountain Range, and I had a sinus infection. And I said, "Wait, wait, wait." I said, "So if you do this, if I do I have to come back and do this all over again?" And they went, "Yes." And I said, "Would you please give me drugs or whatever you need to give me so that I can continue here, because I do not want to come back and do this again. It was horrible." Um,
Yeah,
anyway,
amusingly, so that's another thing. So you'll have the same thing because you have SEER guys, don't you? Special survival, evasion, resistance, escape, or whatever it is.
yeah.
Whereas we have combat survival rescue officers, and so we have exactly that. We go and I was exactly the same as you. I hated the survival training. Had to do it. We had to do resistance to interrogation stuff as well, and that was even more horrible. That was really really
Hmm.
nasty. But we had some guys who absolutely loved it, and they'd go and do
What?
jungle survival and Arctic survival, and you go,
What?
oh no.
What is wrong with these people? They have some kind of a mental problem.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
interesting. It's so
Yeah,
so so
so
similar.
did all that, and I was there at Travis, enjoying the flying that I was doing. I was doing based on the West Coast. It was the 22nd Air Force, so we were split like 21st, 22nd Air Force, so like halfway through the Mississippi River is like the dividing line. So everything out west in the U.S. and then out into the Pacific, and that hemisphere is basically what our playground was. And man, I got a chance to go to so many amazing countries and amazing places that I never dreamed I'd ever be able to do. Oh, I'd like to say first, before I continue, the whole idea of like, I don't want to go into the military because I mean, man, that was one of the best things I've ever done in my life was actually going into the military, meeting the high quality of people that you're with, and getting that training, that military flight training. I mean, I wish everybody out there, regardless of the kind of flying you're going to do, I wish they could all get that kind of training. I mean, it was priceless,
Well, it's
really.
that, yeah, it's an interesting, maybe it's something we'll come back to in a little while as well, because in
Mhm.
in the transition, because I think it's one of the things when I've talked to a couple of airline pilots before on the podcast about now, certainly the lack of hand flying, hands-on
Mm.
flying of the airplane. And if you haven't got a background, I mean, I suppose the most extreme and obvious example of this is Chelsea Sullenberger, isn't it? Where, had he not been a military pilot with all of the experience that he'd had, it's pretty questionable, I think, whether the outcome of that would have been a completely different thing, because he had the literal skills to be able to turn around and make very quick decisions and fly the airplane so well to be able to get everyone off it. Whereas certainly this side, we're in a situation now with lots of my friends in the airlines who the amount of flying they get is really minimal. I mean, because obviously
Yep.
airline policies are such that
Hmm.
you autopilot the majority of the time, and auto land when the weather's restricting you as well. So
Yep.
and if you're long haul, you obviously probably got two crews on the aircraft, and you're getting one landing in four. So it's a really big challenge to turn around and get enough physical proficiency. And actually, interestingly for us, that has shifted a bit in the Air Force as well. So when I was in the Air Force, we were, all my kind of flying career, we were getting lots of flying, physical flying hours. And part of that was because the simulators weren't really that good. I mean, they were there, but they were
Mm.
not that great. Now, of course, the simulators are significantly better, but they are still simulators. And the net result is actually they are being used a lot more, and it's because of cost reasons and all sorts of other reasons. There's a significant reduction in the amount of physical flying hours that the pilots on the front line get, and I think that hurts because it's still the same thing. You can fly the simulator all you want, but it's still a simulator, and it's a simulator. So sorry, it's a digression on my side, but I think it's
Oh,
it's
no, no,
it's really really
no. This
and
is
it's an issue.
it's an issue, and it's a very important issue, and something that we have to do something about. It really, I mean, I don't know where. Let me see if I can find my soapbox. It's here somewhere. I mean, I know you've heard me get on top of it and talk about flying skills and manual, hand flying manual skills. And here in the U.S., I mean, the NTSB and the FAA have been saying to the airlines for decades, especially in recent times with so many of the accidents involving loss of control, that hey, you need to have your people, your pilots, with do more hands-on flying. They say that the airlines go, yeah, and they put out a memo, and this is what we want and everything, but then actually what they kind of are saying is like, well, really don't do that, because the auto, it's like a catch 22. And I understand also for the pilots themselves, like, okay, if I actually turn everything off and hand fly the airplane, I'm going to expose myself to maybe the fact that I'm not really all that, and maybe I'm a little rusty, and I don't want to embarrass because we pilots, we have pride. We don't want to show other people that maybe we're not as good as we think we are, and so leaving all the automation on, especially nowadays with it being so good, just so easy. And then all the programs they have now, the FOQA, the standards, the devices on the airplanes and these modern airplanes, that if you go like just a hair over a certain bank angle, or you pitch is a little bit too rapid on that
It's going to
initial,
squeal.
climb out, or
Yeah.
yeah, it squeals on every, and then so I mean, I completely understand. I mean, I understand, that's great. These systems are great. They identify trends, and they are really a safety thing. On the other hand, it's like one of the things that's negative is that nobody really wants to actually do it by hand because they're afraid they're going to get squawked on, and have to explain themselves or get some extra training, in the simulator on your days off. That's no fun,
Mm.
So it's kind of it's a vicious cycle, I'd say, and I don't know how to solve it, but it's something that people have to be aware of. And I know a lot of people out there are. It's just I don't know how to solve it. Um, but getting back to the training that I received. And getting back to the what we just talked about. Well, first of all, before I go to that, you reminded me of something when you talked about Sully Sullenberger, and the miracle on the Hudson, and the fact that he had military training. Not only that, did you know? And I thought this was interesting. Not only, I think that all three of the pilots that were involved in like dead stick landings of airline transport category airplanes, that one we just talked about, Sully, the Gimli glider
Hmm.
in Canada, and the Air Transat A330, I think, that they kind of forced a fuel starvation issue, and they landed dead stick in the Azores, I think. All three of those, every single one of those pilots also were glider pilots. I'm thinking that may have had something to do with the fact that they knew how how to maintain energy in the airplane and how to
Yeah.
manage the energy and get it on the ground. I think that now I wish that I mean I maybe that's something I can do in the future here now. I don't have any experience at all flying gliders, but in the military you do obviously, especially if you're flying high performance aircraft, learn the concept of energy management, and so I think that's really helpful. And then even that first ride in the T-37, like one of my first rides where I was just like thinking that this instructor pilot I was sitting next to was like God, because we were like in the weather and I was upside down. I was convinced of it, but we weren't. And he was somehow flying this airplane. We weren't crashing. I was just like, oh, I can't believe that he is such an amazing. He was a FAPE, by the way. Um, but in Columbus, Mississippi, the weather is crappy. It's not Arizona where it's beautiful sunny weather all the time. In Columbus, Mississippi, in the southeastern United States, we get a lot of not very good weather, a lot of overcast. You have to fly through IMC, and so right away you learn how to recover from an unusual attitude, and you learn instrument procedures and all that kind of stuff. So that's to me the most priceless part of the military training experience is, hey, if you've had that experience, you're in an airliner and you're upside down and your nose is 20 degrees nose low or whatever. Um, if you've had this kind of training in the past, it's like, no, I've seen this before. Now it might not be as easy to recover an airliner than it is a fighter or a trainer, but it's still at least you have that fundamental knowledge of how
No,
to
I
do it.
totally agree. And it's fascinating, isn't it, how your personal perceptions change and grow. I mean, I vividly remember when I was in flying training as well that I think we were we're in the Jet Provost, which is a bit like T-37, really similar sort of airplane, single engine, pretty slow jet trainer, and or side by side though. So you're sat right next to the instructor, and then
Hmm.
probably 4 or 5 trips in, they just went and showed you a low level, because in those days we were, if you're certainly in the fast jet world, we were low level all the time. That's what we did. We lived
Okay.
below 2,000 feet and mostly below 500 feet. And
Hmm.
and so they went and did this demo flight, and we did it. I was flying at a place called Linton on Ouse, which is just north of York in the kind of north of England, and a lovely, lots of wild space out there, and countryside to go and fly in. And we were flying down a thing called the North York Moors Railway, which is in the North Yorkshire Moors, and it's actually a little narrow valley. And we went down this at 250 feet, and your head's banging against the side of the canopy, and you're being thrown around. You think, and we're doing this at 240 knots, and our routine speed for flying around at low levels 450 knots. So you're going to go, I'm never going to cope with this. This is just way too
Yeah.
much. And actually,
Right.
only a few months later, you're doing the same thing, and it's all because it's all building blocks, and you're progressively building layer on layer
Yeah.
on layer on layer. You suddenly, you're going, why did I ever find this difficult?
Right.
So it's very interesting, isn't it, how you can progressively build that up if you get the time and the effort to, put in behind it.
Exactly. And I got a chance to kind of experience that as well. So when I was flying the 141, I got this letter that said, "Hey, we're considering, bringing back a whole bunch of people from major weapon systems like the 141, the F-15, all the stuff that people are assigned that aren't coming back to be a trainer." But so everything was getting a little bit of out of balance in the flight training world there because of the fact that those FAPEs, they love those FAPEs because they get so much work out of them. but it was mostly FAPEs and very little people that had real, real world mission experience in whatever category.
Hmm.
And so they thought somebody went in there and went, we really need to rebalance this or try. And so I was on a list of people at my squadron and my wing in California at Travis that was on the list to come back as a an instructor pilot. And I'm thinking, no, like when I saw that that Air Training Command sign in my rear view mirror as I was leaving Columbus, Mississippi, I thought, I ain't never coming back. Should never say that. Never, yeah, never say never, right? So I asked my, executive officer, how do I get out of this? And they go, well, in the past we were able to do it, pull some strings, but not now. They're really pushing for getting people back. And I said, really, there must be a way for me not to do this because I don't want to. I want to fly the one. And again, I'm still under this idea that I got to have this experience to be hired by the airlines. And I'm thinking this is just going to ruin everything. And he goes, well, you could go out and your flight check ride. We have like Q1, Q2, Q3. I don't know if you use the same kind of terminology, but Q1 is passed. Q2 is, you did okay, but there's some things you can improve upon. Q3 is like you hooked the ride, you busted the ride. You could go out and get a Q3, Jeff, bust the check ride. Okay, what else? I don't want to do that. You could get a bad officer evaluation report.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I'm thinking I can't do that. What if, the airlines aren't hiring, and what if I want to stay in and I want to make rank in proper order? I can't, you
Those
get
aren't attractive options, are they?
No, you couldn't do that. And then there was a third one, and to this day I cannot remember what it was, but it was just as distasteful as the other two. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I was just resigned that I was going to come back and be and it turned out it was a good thing because my wife is from Atlanta, Georgia, Columbus, Mississippi, Atlanta, Georgia, not too far away, like a 4-hour drive. Her father had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and um, coming back from Northern California to be closer to where her father was in his last, year or whatever was really, kind of a blessing in disguise for her and for me too. But yeah, so I learned how to be an instructor pilot. They send, they get you qualified in the jet first at the base, and then they send you to another base where you go the pilot instructor training. We call it
Was
PIT.
that T-37s or T-38s?
It was T-37s.
Okay.
And actually, I don't know if I requested it or that's where they're going to put me, but I wanted to do that because I thought that it would be more rewarding to get that, to have that feeling of, accomplishment, taking somebody basically right off the street,
Yeah,
hardly
never
any
flown.
knowledge
Yeah,
of flying, to really making them a military pilot, formation, aerobatics, all that, stuff. And so that's what I did. I went to pilot instructor training at Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. What a beautiful base! They always make fun of us Air Force people here in the U.S. military. Our bases are always like country clubs, and painted curbs, and the emphasis is always on that kind of thing, not the mission so much. And it's actually pretty much 80-90% true.
yeah, golf
But
course, yeah, that sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
golf courses
yeah.
and amazing officers clubs. Back then, we actually had officers clubs. I don't know what it's like over there where you are, but here it's like there's no such thing as an officers club anymore. It's all like a combined club, and it's
It
just
still
like a
exists
family
but for
setting.
us, but it's I mean the usage and the kind of change of behavior is, I mean,
Yeah,
symptomatic of the wider world. I think it's just very different now
yeah,
for a whole bunch of
yeah.
reasons actually.
That's true. That's true. So, I mean, I get it. I understand why they went that way, but I'm just glad that I had the experience in the 80s where it was still like the quintessential officers club. What do they call the name of the club at Randolph? The Auger Inn, I think, is it's kind of famous. It's not as famous as the Top Gun, club and that kind of thing, but it's in the Air Force annals it's pretty high up there as like one of those classic uh, officers club experiences. Anyway, so I went there, and then I ended up graduating. Oh, I was top gun in my class of in pilot instructor training,
Nice.
and so I'm thinking, I'm proud of the accomplishments that I made when I was in the military. Even though I didn't fly the fast jets, I was still I could have if I wanted to. And later on, when I was flying in the airlines, I remember flying with this captain that the very first thing he would say or ask of anybody in his cockpit is like what our background was and everything. And if you mentioned it, if it wasn't a fighter, he almost like,
Kicked
made
you off
him
the flight deck.
like you piece of crap. And like, not quite, but you know what I mean? It was like, he felt okay. And I finally got so tired of that. And one day I said, I just want you to know that I was a distinguished graduate in pilot training and I could have flown anything. I just didn't want to, and that kind of shut him up. He never asked that question of me anymore. Anyway, getting off the track again. And again, if you need me to push me in a different direction, just let me
You're
know
good. It's
because
fascinating. Yeah, it's
yeah.
fascinating.
Okay. So yeah, so I did my last 4 years in the U.S. Air Force was as a undergraduate pilot training flight instructor. And it was rewarding, although that T-37 is not a comfortable airplane. I'm sure it was like that Provost, where, it doesn't go fast and it's very, very hot. And, in the southeastern U.S. and, it gets very hot and humid and it was not comfortable. And I realized that, I don't want to do the whole flight line kind of world. And they're grooming me to be a flight commander. And I was, you start off when you come back from another kind of world, you start off as an assistant flight commander, and all the administrative stuff like writing officer evaluation reports for all your instructors and everything else. I'm thinking, no, I don't want to do that. I'm lazy. So I ended up kind of getting myself out of that pipeline and over into the student squadron. I was an academic instructor, and then I was a guest help instructor pilot with the flying, the active squadrons. Perfect, man. I love, as you can tell, I love talking. I love instructing. I love that whole, teaching thing. And then also love the fact that I'm in a little cubicle over in a different building. Nobody really knows exactly what my schedule is, so I have a lot of flexibility. I can take very long lunches, and if they see that I'm not in my office and they know that I'm not teaching, they just assume that I'm flying in the T-37 squadron with one of my students. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, eventually I did that for a while, and as you know, I'm sure this is true in the corporate world as well. Anytime you start doing well at something, they just keep giving you more and more and more, and it just becomes less and less and less fun to do. And so I thought the same thing was happening to me in the academic student squadron world as well. And I'm thinking, I don't want to be a class commander. I want, and so I ended up going to the safety division at the base, wing safety. And the cool thing about that is that's when I got a chance to become a certified aircraft accident investigator. They sent us out to a school in Southern California that at the time was run by the University of Southern California at Norton Air Force Base, and it was like considered one of the top safety schools in the world. And so it's like a 3-month long course, and I loved it. Had a great time. So having that experience and not instructor, aircraft accident investigator course and experience really has come in handy quite a lot for what I'm doing now, the aviation podcast, because in our news segment, most of the things that we cover are aircraft accidents and incidents, and it's nice to have the knowledge of aircraft investigation techniques and also the experience of actually living and flying in that world, that little segment of aviation. So
Yeah, sure. Makes it much more credible, doesn't it? If you've got the knowledge to be able to turn around and apply
I think so. Or you just act like you know what you're talking about, and most of the time people will
it.
believe
Fake
you.
it till you make it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth to that. Anyway, yeah. So I was in wing safety, and then that was the last thing that I did before I set off for the airlines. I was I was actually starting my initial training at Delta before my official date of separation in the Air Force, because I had built up some leave that so I was able to start a little bit earlier. And in the airline world, if you can start, I mean, if they have a class starting every week or every 2 weeks with 50 people in it or however many, You wouldn't think it would make that much of a difference, but seniority, at least here in the United States, everything is based in the major airlines, at least on seniority. Whatever that is, whenever you get hired and wherever you were in your class, relatively speaking, is going to make a potentially big difference on what airplanes you fly and where you're based and that kind of thing. So,
It's very similar
um,
here, I think, and it's actually
okay.
one of the reasons that certainly for my friends who've gone to the airlines, if you're going to do it, you need to do it early enough that you can accrue the seniority. If you leave late, you might have spent years flying you've got thousands of flying hours in the Air Force, even if they're on transports, things like that, that are very relevant kind of flying hours, but then you don't get any credit for that at all. It's
No.
basically your seniority starts the day you arrive in the in the sort of right hand seat of the airplane. So yeah, it's exactly the same.
Just like real estate, what the three most important things: location, location, location. In the airline world, especially here in the US, seniority, seniority, seniority. Those are the three things that are most important.
Did you have
And it's fun.
just to jump
Hmm.
into the transition bit? Did
Hmm.
Because obviously you've been on the 141 and then gone back as an instructor. Do you, in terms of doing your certificates, your licenses to become an airline transport pilot, was that helpful? Because obviously one of the challenges that here, we see guys who are if they're flying the Voyager, which is essentially an A330, then of course they've got all the tickets really really easily to
Hmm.
jump into the airlines. Whereas if you're a fast jet guy, actually it's quite a painful process to then go through the whole airline transport pilot's license and do all the exams, get all the qualifications to go and fly. Obviously, you have to do a bunch of flying with proper asymmetric because they don't consider a fast jet with twin engines, right next to each other as asymmetric, reasonably so.
Hmm.
And so it's actually quite a process that's meant that there was a distinct advantage to going to the airlines from this side if you had come from a multi-engine background. So your original premise that you wanted to go into the 141 because that was going to ease your path into the airlines, that would certainly have been true here, with the one exception of back in the probably 90s where Cathay Pacific was actively recruiting ex-fast jet guys because they kind of took the view that the best people in the Air Force are flying fast jets, therefore we're best pilots in the Air Force, and so therefore we'll take them and we'll take the training overhead. But the everyone else, it was pretty much no. If you've got big airplane experience, that's much more useful.
So what I learned, at least it was true back in the late 80s when I was going through this transition. My whole concept of flying the big transports and that kind of thing was completely wrong because what the airlines like Delta, American, United, all the big major legacy airlines, what they considered important was what you did, whatever fleet you were flying, whatever kind of mission you flew. If you were an instructor in that on that airplane or an evaluator on that airplane, that was the key, not what kind of, because they know you've all gone through, and back when I went through undergraduate pilot training, every single one of us, whether you fly a bomber, a transport, tanker, fast jet, whatever, we all go through the same exact training. Now it's a two, not long after I got out of the Air Force, they went to a two-track kind of thing. So they can, early on, they identify pilot skills and they go into, so the ones that are going to be in the fast jets go into the T-38, and then the ones that are not then go to like some kind of a business jet, like a beach jet, Mitsubishi jet, whatever. And that makes sense. I'm just so happy that I got a chance to fly that T-38. I still remember that first time going, walking out by myself on the flight line with my, parachute and helmet, and I'm walking out to that T-38, and I'm going, I cannot believe that they're going to let me fly this airplane
Yeah.
by myself. Oh man, it was surreal, and I don't even think I had 100 hours in my logbook at that point. I'm sure well shy of that. Anyway, off the track again, but somehow I managed to get in it and not kill myself, which is the story of the entire pilot training, especially every time I was solo. um, in fact, wait, just a quick little story if we can. When I was in the latter stage, the advanced training, we were in navigation, instruments, and that kind of thing in the T-38. And I came back into the squadron after some kind of a navigation ride or instrument ride. And the scheduler looks down and goes, Nielsen, Nielsen, yes, sir. You have like a contact ride left, right? Which is you go out solo aerobatics to an area somewhere and do some pattern work when you come back. And I went, yeah, yes, sir. I think I have one left. And he goes, all right, get out there. You're already late. Blah blah blah. And usually I take have a special knee board that has like an insert for the parameters for aerobatic maneuvers, and I didn't have time to get it, and it had been months since I'd actually done a ride like that. And so I go out to the area, get established. I'm thinking I'm going to start off with a loop and put the nose down, military power. And I'm thinking, okay, there's 350 knots. And I start pulling back, the 4Gs or whatever, and that just feels, I don't know, maybe about this point, how far would that be? Like maybe 40, 50 degrees nose high. Everything's feeling a little different. I'm thinking, well, it's been a while since I've done this, so obviously it's going to feel not quite the way that I'm used to. And then about this point, almost vertical, I remembered back when I was in one of my initial T-38 rides where we do these things with your instructor pilot called confidence maneuvers. And I don't know, I think maybe sometimes you should call them lack of confidence maneuvers, but I do remember, he showed me like a really high nose attitude kind of a thing and what to do and how to get out of it. And he said, okay, now you do it. And then so I did it and I went like almost 90 degrees and he's going, I still remember him yelling over the intercom, don't touch the throttles, don't touch the throttles, don't. And so I'm by myself now, almost in the same kind of a position. And nobody's back there screaming, but I can still hear him in my mind. Don't touch the throttles. Don't touch the throttle. I don't know what kind of maneuver I did. It was probably something similar to like a hammerhead stall or something like that in a
Another
T-38.
loop.
And finally, and the airplane's just kind of just dropping out of the sky. And I'm hoping that there's going to be enough airflow to get, if the engines flame out or for them not to flame out. And I hope that I can recover before I reach the bottom of the area and then get busted for that. But somehow managed to do that. And then the rest of the sortie, I was just doing what they call border patrol. I was like, I wasted that's the ride you can do all the things that you're probably never, ever going to do again in an airplane.
It is funny though, isn't it? How because obviously I flew single seat most of my career, and when I was the Jaguar in particular was useless at aerobatics. And we do it occasionally if you go off a general handling ride. But when I then went through onto the Typhoon and was flying at the same time, I was flying the Battle Memorial Flight airplanes, and then because you don't get enough time on the historic airplanes, you fly. We have a Chipmunk, which is an old, tandem seat piston trainer, and it was great fun to fly. I mean, it was a lovely airplane to go and take out on a kind of Friday afternoon or something, and particularly as I was the base commander, to go and just kind of get some of the cobwebs out and enjoy it. And normally very few airplanes, the Jet Provost and the Hawk you could spin. None of the fast jets you could spin. The Chipmunk you could spin. And I was cleared for solo spinning. And it's the one thing I really didn't enjoy doing was solo spinning. All the aerobatics and everything else was fine. But I was always just the spinning bit was because you never quite knew, sometimes you'll be in a spin and it will go a bit high rotational and it will be really messy and and it was just one of those things that I kind of never really got comfortable with, despite having, by that stage, 3,000 fast jet hours and all the rest of it. It was just a bit odd to do. So it's really easy to get into that space where you kind of, no, this doesn't feel quite right.
Right. So interestingly, the T-37 was also a jet trainer that you could spin. And in fact, I hated spins when I was a student, but I came back as an instructor and I did them so many darn times that it got to be just like, yeah, okay, here we go. It's just no big deal. I guess it's true with so many things in life, right? After you've done them a million times, you're just like, that's just no big deal. But they didn't let student pilots spin. That was definitely prohibited.
No, that was the same for us. We didn't, in training, you do spinning, you'd only ever do it dual.
Oh, okay. I see. So when you were going up,
it was only the Chipmunk thing that you could I could do it.
Yeah, I understand your reluctance to do that because spins can definitely go wonky.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, you were always in the back of your mind doing that kind of thing as well. We didn't have very many. We had two of these airplanes, and the Air Force has two of them. So you're kind of conscious that nah, I don't really want to do anything wrong with this. This is not a
Don't
good
want to break
outcome.
it.
So no, I don't really want to break it.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, in hindsight, I looked at my little cheat sheet when I got back, trying to figure out why it felt so weird. I was only 100 knots too slow on the entry. It was
Yeah, I
a
was going to say it should have
450
been
knot.
450 knots. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
about right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, where was I before I got off into that little tangent or
Oh,
rat
you're just
hole?
talking about the transition off to Delta,
Oh
really,
yeah,
and the
yeah,
and that shift.
yeah. So it turns out that I mean, personally, it was probably easier for me than someone like you or Captain Anderson. Single seat guys going into a multi-crew kind of environment. I had been exposed to it enough, even though it had been, my previous assignment, I still remembered it very well. And standardization was really, really, the top priority in the Air Force. And at Delta at that time, they were just starting to really understand the importance of standards and making it so that you walk into and the way it is now, and it has been for several decades. You're trained for an airline, and I think this is true for almost most of the airlines in the world. Maybe some developing countries is probably maybe not exactly like this, but in all of the big countries of the world, you walk into the cockpit and everybody knows what to expect from you because you've been trained to these standards, and nobody deviates from those standards. And if somebody does, it's quite obvious that somebody is deviating from them, and it makes everybody feel uncomfortable.
And I guess you
And
need that
so,
as well, don't you? Because you're rarely flying with the same people. I mean,
exactly.
so I mean, I think one of the differences, two crew in the Air Force, which I only did for
Hmm.
one tour. You didn't have that many of you on the squadron. You'd fly with the same people quite regularly. If you're doing operational
Right.
type stuff, you would fly constituted crews. You would deliberately work to fly with the same person all the time,
Yep.
because it was important. You needed to think together and be able to operate together
Hmm.
without the kind of distractions of that. But in the airline world, I know that's a rarity that you're flying with the same people.
And even in the military airlift command, same thing. You're flying with different crews. Maybe the group of pilots is not quite as large as the where you're based and flying for the airlines, but it's very similar. So standardization is definitely a key safety factor, and it makes it comfortable for everybody, right? You know what to expect. They know what to expect from you, and it just makes it a better environment for everybody. Um, so in that respect, I'm glad that I did have that kind of experience. But as far as the actual getting an interview and getting hired by the company, it didn't really matter that much. Again, maybe that's changed now. I know that there are a lot of things that have changed since I went through the military to airline transition. Fewer and fewer pilots now are have that military experience, and so more and more are being hired from the civilian world, where things are different. Not and please don't take that as I think that they're somehow inferior. It's not. And people have asked me this. So like when you go and you fly with a crew and they find out that they have military background, does that mean they're going to be a better pilot? And I said, well,
No, it's
not
just different. Yeah.
necessarily. I think it's the same spectrum. You fly with really, really good pilots, average pilots, and maybe a little below average pilots. And guess what? Regardless of where they come from, you're probably going to have that same kind of distribution of skills and that kind of thing. Thing that I would say though, and I do understand now why the airlines were very high on hiring people from the military. Not only did they know that even if you were the worst person in your military training class, you're still probably above average compared to the group of pilots out there. Number one. Number two, you're an officer. And this is, your show. You talk about leadership. I mean, that's something that you don't necessarily get in the civilian world before you're hired by a major airline. Maybe you're exposed to it, but likely not. And so, going and having that experience as an officer first, and they reminded us of that so many times, and I'm sure they did with you as well. You're an officer first and a pilot second.
Yeah, yeah,
And
definitely. And I think I mean, interestingly, in the work I do on leadership now, one of the challenges, and I talk about it regularly to people, is that I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say the military leadership approach is perfect by any means, certainly ours, and probably not the US one either. But it does, you get a lot of it. You get a lot of training, you get a lot of opportunities to lead, and you get some of those training interventions are quite long. You know, they'll give you a really serious exposure to that. Whereas in
mhm,
the commercial world, and it doesn't matter whether you're in the finance world or the manufacturing or the airline industry, the level of leadership training you get is really much lower. And a lot of the time, you've got people who are suddenly they're thrown in positions of responsibility with big team of people they're working that are working underneath them, and it's all osmosis. It's what have I seen along the way and picked up as
mhm.
stuff rather than anybody having invested any serious effort. So yeah, I totally agree, and I think even in the context of being in the cockpit of an airliner, the benefit of that kind of leadership approach where you've got a crew that you've got to lead who are looking for somebody to lead them, and particularly when stuff goes wrong, right? I mean,
Yes,
that's when as always with these things, that's when it really matters. If everything's running on rails, it's much less of an issue. But if
exactly.
stuff's going pear shaped, then that's when you really need to start stepping up and leading properly.
Absolutely. So true. Yeah. So the transition for me was relatively easy and fit right in. And so I started my 35-year career of flying airliners. And until about a little over a year and a half ago, that's what I did in my career. And I was, I don't want to say I was just a line pilot in the airlines. I could have volunteered to do more management types of positions like being line check airman or simulator instructor, or even go into the world of the managing the pilot groups, chief pilot, that kind of thing. A lot of opportunities for that, and a lot of my peers that I spent a lot of time with in the military were doing those kind of positions. But I at that point in my life, it was I want to focus on my family and do my job as a line pilot. I really enjoyed going out and flying trips and laying over and interacting with fellow air crew members and cabin crew members and being a leader. Although, I have to say I didn't really think about it very much like, oh, you're like being a leader, Jeff, and you're using these 5 skills that you learned. And no, it was more of for me, more of a natural thing. And I really I really enjoyed it. So perhaps one of the things you were thinking about asking me, like a high point in my career, especially in my airline career, was the going from first officer to upgrading to captain, and how that was a pivotal event for me. And
How long did that take, Jeff? How long were you in the airline before you actually jumped into the
so
left seat?
I could at the time, this was like in the 90s, late 90s, when I was kind of in that zone for, and again, this is all unlike a lot of places in the world where, merit has a lot to do with the opportunity to upgrade. In my experience, it was, again, everything was seniority. I
Yeah.
mean, if you could be the worst pilot and worst leader in the world, and if your seniority is good enough, as long as you can make it through the training, you're going to upgrade to captain. I didn't like that aspect of it. I'm thinking, I mean, it's fair, for sure. But on the other hand, I've flown with some captains. I've flown with some captains that probably should not be captains. Not only, and not just because of perhaps flying skills that aren't, above average, but more so the way they conducted themselves as leading the crew, like not leading at all. And I have a bunch of stories about that. And that's for me, that was for me. I did have the background in the military and leadership and all that, for sure. But I think that the thing that was most important for me as far as learning how to be a leader was flying with other quote unquote leaders,
Hmm.
other captains, and seeing how they conducted the flight crew, the cockpit conduct, the atmosphere that they created. And this is the way I think most of us learn how to be a captain and how not to be a
Yeah,
captain.
yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally. I talk about it all the time, actually, that I have a sort of metaphorical two jars. I have a jar of stuff I really like that's either stuff I've done or that's been successful, or people I've worked with or that I've looked at as people who are in charge of leading me, and I like what they do. And I have another jar that's all the stuff I hate. It's the things that I've done wrong and the mistakes I've made and people I've worked with who I think, no, I'm never ever going to do it like that. And I think that is absolutely the way that people build that skill set. 100%. I totally agree with you, and I think it's you've got to be presented with the right kind of opportunities to do that. And I think it's interesting your reflection that you didn't really feel like you were a leader. I mean, obviously you're I can totally equate to that. You're in that position where you're just getting on and doing it, but the reality is, of course, you're leading. If when you're in the left seat, you're leading the crew. You are as you start going up the seniority ladder as a captain, other captains are going to start looking at you and to some extent cloning you and looking at what you
Hmm.
do and how you behave, and that's either good examples or bad examples. I was really interested. I'm not sure it's a book that has got as much traction your side of the Atlantic, but there's a book called Black Box Thinking, which is written by a
Hmm.
guy called Matthew Syed. And it's really interesting because he talks a lot about embracing failure and learning from, not on an individual level to a degree, but also systemically across organizations. And he uses the the thread running through the book really is the medical profession versus the aviation world. And it's a really quite a heart tugging book initially because it starts off with a horrible true story of a lady who was went in for a very routine operation and ultimately ends up dying. She was only 37 because the surgeons at the time were couldn't agree with what they were going to do. They got totally task focused on trying to fix one thing one way. They kind of had the wrong in what you and I would understand as cross cockpit gradient. The nurse was standing there with the right kit to help them intervene, and they didn't, because she felt she couldn't intervene because these are
Hmm.
super senior doctors. And the
Right.
contrast that her husband, this lady's husband, was an airline pilot. And he looked at this from a cultural point of view about the way that the aviation industry was working and had developed over years. A lot of it written in blood, obviously, in terms of some of the lessons of the past, but actually moving to a place where we were, and I think it's true for the military. It's also certainly true for the civil world, and that there's a much more open culture about sharing mistakes and opening the aperture for people to learn from things that have gone wrong, and even quite senior people stepping up and saying, hey, look, I screwed up. This is why. This is what you can learn from this. And
Hmm.
that is such a healthier environment to be in. Whereas the example the other way around with the medical profession was, and I think it's moved a long way away from this now, but it's still got some wrinkles. And he uses lots and lots of other examples as well. It's a really interesting book with a culture that is completely the opposite. It's hierarchy based. It's very focused around seniority is everything, and therefore you don't question the senior people.
Hmm.
And I think that's a fascinating when you look at the way that particularly the airlines now are very much into crew resource management and kind of cross cockpit gradient and encouraging people to be cross checking each other and mutual assurance of all the numbers are right and everything else. And I think that is so valuable if you've got that kind of approach. And we had the same. I mean, when we're flying formation sorties in the military, in the debrief in particular. I mean, even though you're flying single seat airplanes, you can cover up a lot if you're single seat. The approach was that you shared stuff that was valuable and people could learn from. And I think
Yeah.
again, it's vitally important if you do that.
It might it might hurt a bit to hear something, have some, negative or constructive criticism, but you have to have that mindset where you have to be open to accept it, and sometimes you have to take a day or two before you react to it, and then after contemplating what has been said, you realize, they're right. I didn't do that quite as well as I should, or maybe I
Yeah, and
should
I
use a
think this,
different
and your
approach.
personal integrity counts here as well. I mean, when I was a squadron commander running a Jaguar squadron, I had we had a system in place at the time called a confidential reporting system. It was called Condor, which was the confidential occurrence direct reporting system, and blah blah. And essentially, it was exactly that. You had some sort of incident, you could report this completely anonymously, and then it got a squadron commander's comments and station commander, base commander's comments, and on what had happened, the idea was just you should feel willing, able to share this without any impact on you whatsoever. And I had,
Mhm.
while I was a squadron boss, I very, very nearly on a particular sortie, I won't bore you with all the details, but I very nearly had a mid-air collision with my leader. I was the wingman, which would have obviously been my fault. I mean, I'm supposed to miss him, right? And there were some circumstances that were slightly mitigating, but nonetheless, it was a really serious learning point in terms of the way I had conducted it. And so I wrote one of these things, and in the squadron commander's box, which obviously was going to come to me next as a squadron commander, I wrote, "I am the squadron commander." And it was hugely valuable for a lot of because my station commander then obviously knew it was me and wrote the
Mhm.
his comments and so on, and again, all reflected the fact that this is a really honest report by by a senior guy in the force, blah 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 blah, all sorts of good stuff. And of course, the message it sends down to effectively the line pilots, if you like, on
Mhm.
the squadron is a really powerful one. And I think
Yes.
it's something that the world of aviation has got right and needs to continue to get right and continue to go into that more and more into that space where we have that kind of culture, because it's so useful to have it that way.
And yeah, what you said, by what doing what you did is so much more powerful than putting out a memo and outlining, this is the thing that we should consider. But seeing that a senior officer says, you know what, I screwed up, and I fessed up on this, and I'm doing this so that everybody else can learn from it. That says more than any words could ever. I I think. Um, so we're talking about the, learning how to be a leader, a captain, commander, whatever you want to call it in the airline world is a little bit of, oh, I like that, or I really don't like that. For me, the jar of I really don't like that, I'm never ever gonna do that when I'm a captain is much. I had much more stuff in that one. And the jar that, oh, I like what they're doing, was good, and the stuff that was in that jar of I really like that, positive things, were like really, really good stuff, really good stuff. And I found myself really enjoying and trying to bid trips together with captains that they they seemed very laid back. And I think that if you asked anybody that flew with me, they would probably say, "Oh yeah, Jeff, he was a very laid back captain." Doesn't mean that I don't care and then I'm sloppy and I'm not following standard operating procedures. No, I'm doing all that. It's just that, and I picked this up from, I'm sure, other captains, as far as pre-briefings before you start a trip. That initial briefing that you have with your crew, and the chances are you had never flown with that person, or back in the day when I was a captain on the 727, those those other pilots, three of us. Um, I'd say, hey, look, let's make this fun. This is like the best job in the world. There's no reason why we should be like having a bad time unless it involves like bad weather or mechanical issues or passenger problems or something like that. Other than that, let's let's do this and have fun. And and also make sure that they understood that I'm going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. But let's, if you let me make a mistake, then we've both made that mistake. Like, I know I'm not saying it very eloquently, but basically, let's keep each other out of trouble, because guess what? It's not fun to have to fill out reports and go and talk to the chief pilot or whatever, or a representative from the FAA and TSB regarding something you really screwed up. Let's keep each other from ever getting close to having that situation, and let's just have fun. And that's the kind of environment that I really enjoyed. And when I flew with others, the really, really good captains, the really, really good leaders were the ones that, man, I'm having a great time. This person, I can tell, loves what he's doing or she's doing. But when there was a situation when the crap hit the fan, and things were going downhill fast, you knew that that person was the leader, that that or he or she, that's where the buck stopped. And there was no doubt about that. Anytime there's a doubt about that, and I've been in situations where, come on, man up, like let's make a decision here. And then your underling, your first officer or whatever is making decisions for you, the decisions that you need to make as a leader of this crew. And yeah, that was just so disheartening to see. And I vowed that I'd never ever let that happen when I was in command. And but one of the nice rewarding things for me, Bob, is that over time, because I flew for quite some time, and some of the fleets I flew on for thousands and thousands of hours, like the airplane I was never going to fly, the Mad Dog, the McDonnell Douglas MD-88, and a little bit of MD-90 time as well. There's a story there. Why, the airplane I was never going to fly. I flew 18 years and over 12,500 hours. So like
Why were
more
you
than
never going to fly
anything.
it? What's the story?
Well, because it's just it's a DC-9. It's a more modern version of a DC-9. And back in the day when I was growing up at Delta, I was flying the 727 and then later the L-1011. Three pilot crew, three holers, three engines. Everybody just looked down on anybody that flew the Mad Dog. Like, oh, that's just such a stinking piece of what. And it's what's interesting about that is when I got displaced off the 727 after 9/11, they rapidly increased the rate of retirement of those airplanes. I was the second group of captains that got displaced from, being a captain on that. And so you can kind of choose, kind of like your dream sheet in the military. You can kind of say, okay, well, if you bump me off of this, then this is where I want to go. The airplane, the base, that kind of thing. And so I was in that situation, and I'm looking at my opportunities, which were like not a lot of opportunities. If I didn't want to fly captain on the MD-88 and the Mad Dog in Atlanta, then I was going to have to commute somewhere and fly the Boeings and whatever. And I thought, yeah, I don't want to commute. No, I want to just drive from my home to down to the airport. Yeah, traffic's kind of crappy sometimes, but I know that, I have all weekend to get home or whatever. It's just I don't have to get on another airplane and fly somewhere else. I didn't want to because I've talked to a lot of people that commute that didn't mind it seemingly. For me, I just know that as laid back as I am, and as much as I'd say, it doesn't bother me at all. I know that deep inside that probably would be a stressor that wouldn't be healthy for me. So I thought, okay, well, Jeff, I guess you're going to have to fly the Mad Dog. And you know what? I told myself, it's going to be horrible because of all these horrible things I've heard about this airplane. And I'll just do it for as little as I have to. And then I'll just jump onto something else when it becomes available. Well, it turns out that I started flying it going, well, it's not that bad. I mean, I don't know why people were saying it's a pretty decent airplane. Of course, I'm captain, not first officer. So they're doing all the work. And I'm just like sitting, sitting pretty and steering the airplane on the ground, and well in charge of everything, of course. But that's what I was doing in the other jet. And then I started getting some seniority, and it's seniority we've talked about through, it's been a thread a lot in this interview. Um, you can understand the theory behind something and kind of appreciate it, but you really, really don't appreciate it until you actually experience it yourself. And when I started experiencing it, I thought like the light bulb went off in my head, on the top of my head, and went, oh, now I get it. Now I understand why all of these old guys have been talking about seniority is everything and it's wonderful to have. And I thought, oh, yeah, 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 whatever. It's wonderful. You can control your life. You can pick the trips you want to fly. You can pick your vacations. You can be there for your kids' birthdays and important life events. It's priceless. It really is. So I thought, I'll stay on this a little bit longer. It's not so bad. And then I started getting the mindset as my career advanced. Well, I'm going to jump off this as soon as I have decent seniority on something else. What did decent seniority mean? Well, it kept changing. It was a sliding target, really, for me. But toward the end, my last several years on the Mad Dog, I was like in the top 10. I mean, there were in Atlanta 500 some odd captains, and I was like in the top 10 group, like essentially the top of the list. And you could pick and choose your trips. Because the kind of trips that I like to fly, most of those senior guys didn't want to have anything to do with. So I could pretty much just fly anything I wanted.
Yeah, and I mean, for those I've got listening who are not in this kind of business, I think it's interesting because what you're describing is effectively the bid list process, isn't it? That if you're the most senior captain, you get the bid list first, and it's blank, and you can put
Yep.
down what you want to do. And if you're the most junior one, you get what's left, and that's true in the right hand seat as well. So when you move from right hand seat to left
Hmm.
hand seat, then effectively that process starts again, doesn't it? And so yeah, it really matters in terms of and interestingly. I know a few people on who are from former military life who've gone into the airlines who've said, right, do you know what? I'm going to stay in the right hand seat because I'm a really senior first officer. But if I then jump across and go into the left hand seat, I'm going to suddenly be at the bottom of that again, and I'm going to have to work my way all the way up the same process. So yeah, it's a really significant factor.
A lot of people are very surprised when they hear, they see a guy that looks as old as the captain, maybe older, but they're probably the number one, number two, number three person on that jet. And they are living a great life. And it's all about choices, right? How much does, like making that extra money, how important is that to you? Some of these, a lot of the guys that were really super senior on the right seat were married to women who were very successful, and basically they were making way more money than they were making or
Sure.
could make at the airline. And so I'm thinking, wow, that's a blessing. Now you can just do what you love. And the only downside, I have to say though, is that when you're the captain, you set the tone and you set the atmosphere, and the decisions that are made are now your decisions. And I can't tell you how many times, Bob, when I was a first officer and we'd be flying along and we're looking at the radar and looking at these horrible lines of severe thunderstorms, and I'm thinking, all right, like, when is he going to say something about, asking for a deviation vector or whatever? Now, I have to say, in modern times with air traffic control and all the advancements in technology, they're very good at looking out for these kind of things. But, in the early days, well, back in early days, in the early 90s and the mid 90s and late 90s, when we didn't have that technology and the air traffic controllers really were not that helpful. They were just like, yeah, do whatever you want. You're kind of on your own. Um, I can't tell you how many times I go, son of a gun, this guy is going to, we're not going should I ask for a deviation? No, we're good. I'm thinking, really? We're good? And I just reached
Watching this
down
red
and
blob on the radar. Yeah.
a couple of times I actually had to knowing that this is going to probably make me not very positive in the eyes of the captain, but I'm concerned because we have flight attendants up there in the back doing a service. And we're about to go through, even if we get close to this, it's going to be horrible.
Yeah, well, you
And
have big weather, of course, as well. I mean, that's I think this side, yeah, fine, we get thunderstorms, but I mean, I've flown around in the
yeah,
States, a fair bit in military jets, and and certainly in the Jaguar, you could not get above the weather. I mean, in the Typhoon, you can
right.
get above the weather, but there's no prospect in the Jaguar, and of course, we had no radar either. So you definitely very very conscious of trying to make
Oh,
sure that you knew what was going on in terms of flying into big thunderstorms with tops at 50,000 feet and just horrendous. I mean, because they are very very difficult if you're in there.
well, then people say, well, oh, you got an ejection seat. You could always punch out. I go, yeah, you really want to punch out
No,
in the middle of a
yeah,
severe thunderstorm
you're
cell?
not going to survive
Don't
that.
think
Yeah,
so.
no, no, exactly.
So when I came back after flying the 141 for a couple of years and having color weather radar and all these tools, and then back as an instructor pilot and a trainer that had zero any of those tools, no radar, no. When I get that briefing from the meteorology guy, the weather guy, and if he ever used the words embedded thunderstorms, those two words together, embedded thunderstorms, I'd look at my student and go, we're not going that way. We're going 180 degrees from there. We're going that way because now I know because when you don't know what you don't know is one thing, but when you have been in the world and can see all the stuff that's out there and that could really bite you, and then you're back into a world where you can't see any of that stuff anymore. You're flying around blindfolded. I'm not doing it. They
Yeah,
don't
it's
pay me
interesting.
enough.
I think it's also one of those things, isn't it? As a passenger, who's not remotely into knows anything about flying, I don't think they appreciate some of the time when your the seatbelt sign comes on and everyone goes, "Oh, this is really inconvenient," and all the rest of it. And actually, and there've been a few incidents of late, haven't there, where some aircraft have hit some really severe turbulence, and
Yep.
and you get injuries or even worse, you get fatalities. And
Hmm.
it's brutal. I mean, and in its worst case, on particularly on a low wing loading airplane like an airliner, I mean, it's going to destroy it. And hail in in thunderstorms is it's like someone firing shotgun pellets at you or worse. It's
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 frightening.
really
It's
really
frightening.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's brutal.
So yeah, so a couple times I had to actually like pick up the headset or handset and say like, "Hey, you guys need to like stop your service and sit down right now. Make sure you have your seatbelts on." And I know I kind of got that look from the captain, like, "What are you usurping my authority?" Whatever. I'm thinking, no, I think I wanted to say, no, I think you're an idiot and you're needlessly exposing us to risk and potential injury. And why are you doing this? So, and that was when I got to be a little bit more of a senior first officer, and I just didn't really care anymore. And I knew that if I made a decision, the old co-pilotitis kind of thing, where when you're new and you didn't want to say anything, like you were talking about the story with the black box thinking, and the nurse knowing that she had the solution to what was going on there, but didn't say anything because she defaulted or deferred to these senior doctors. The same thing happens in the airline world, where you're with a very senior, older, experienced captain, and you're thinking, I'm brand new. What do I know? And sometimes you kind of keep things to yourself that you shouldn't keep to yourself. And I finally got to the point when I had a little bit more experience going, you know what? If this is something, I try to think ahead. Okay, something bad happens? Am I able to defend what I did to the chief pilot? And and as long as it was safety related, I don't think that there was ever any doubt that that's what you need to do.
Yeah,
But
correct.
it's
I
hard.
totally
It's a
agree with
hard thing
you.
to do.
Totally agree with you. I think interestingly, the point you sort of touched on there as well is the leadership dynamic, of course, in the from where you've been is not just about what's in the cockpit and the flight deck. I mean, it's also around what's going with the cabin crew down at the back, and ultimately
Yes.
all with the passengers as well. And the and setting the tone, as you said, being quite laid back at the outset and having a kind of friendly set the right conditions. That's got to be much better for the whole crew being comfortable, feeling like it's a kind of nice flight and it's going to be fun and it's going to be
Hmm.
enjoyable because those, the people down the back are interacting with the self-loading freight, and the busy, talking to them about, all sorts of stuff. And you want them to have the putting over the right kind of experience, don't you?
Yes.
And and controlling some of that. And I remember again, a couple of the other airline pilots I've talked to, the challenges some of the time with that, where you've got difficult cabin crew who are actually kind of looking to the captain for everything and constantly, kind of just get on with it. That's your part of ship, sort it out and do your job
Hmm.
as the leader down the back. But obviously, if you're the ultimate leader in the organization, you're setting the tone with that, which has got to be important.
Yep. Yeah. And the part of the setting the tone with the leader of the cabin crew is that this is your thing. I'm going to support you, whatever decision you make, unless of course it's a decision that's ridiculous. Fortunately, that never happened with me. But yeah, just for them to know that they have your full support, and that they identify that they are in charge of this area of the flight, and knowing that this captain is in charge of everything
Hmm.
entirely. If need, he and probably won't step in unless it's something that's needed, uh, you know, to be stepped in.
No,
So,
exactly. I mean, I often talk about one of my kind of important leadership things was always putting an umbrella up and protection over the top of the team. And
yep,
but it was conditional protection. I would essentially,
right.
if anybody was working for me, I'd look after them to the nth degree if they were working within the boundaries they've been given, not breaking the rules, and if they fronted up to me about some mistakes before something that somebody else did. Because I think some of the time, if they, if people go outside their own remit and push it too far, then that obviously is unacceptable. Equally, if they, try and cover it up, and then somebody from outside comes in and goes, "Hey, what's happened here?" Then it's very difficult to protect them at that point. So, setting those boundaries and setting those conditions, I think in any walk of life actually is really, really important. But at the same time, allowing them then to do their job and empowering them to do it and giving them as full as you can, the freedom to do that without interference, because being micromanaged is something nobody likes. I think it's really, really
No, so true. And my philosophy, and I think the right philosophy, is that these people work very hard to get to where they are, whether it be the cabin crew or especially the flight crew. I mean, before you even submit your application to a major airline, you've already got a vast amount of experience and knowledge about flying airplanes and all that. And so my philosophy was always, I have a brand new person just out of training, first trip they're on. If Delta instructors and evaluators thought that they passed all the standards that the company requires, which are high standards, that's good enough for me. I'm not going to doubt that they don't have every bit of knowledge and training that they need to have to do the job that they're going to do for me. So I never micromanaged anything, and the only time I'd ever have to step in, as like in the previous example where something wasn't going right and the standards aren't being met, and again, a very unusual situation. That would be the only time that I would try to step in and say something. And I think that some of the one of the most rewarding things for me, Bob, being a captain, was the fact that, especially as I got on in my career, and I got to be, in fact, the last fleet that I was on, the Boeing 717, which is again another just more modern version of the DC-9 lineage. I was the number one captain for a couple of years, and it was amazing. It's good to be king. But the thing that I started picking up on, and I always called him my favorite co-pilot, Brent, who eventually upgraded to captain himself, which was kind of a bittersweet thing for me, because I mean, he definitely needed to do it even before he did it. He was very hesitant to do it, but it was bittersweet for me because it was my favorite first officer to fly with. It was like, I'm sure this is an experience you may have had in your world, where you fly with the same person all the time. It's almost like you guys are married to each other. It's like your work wife, or whatever you want to call it. It's like you're finishing each other's sentences. I know what he's going to do and think, and he knows what I'm going to do and think. And it's such a comfortable thing. I think it's a safety thing, a big safety thing.
I think in the two crew worlds, which I wasn't in very much. I mean, I think you're absolutely
Hmm.
right. I mean, and particularly on operational stuff, because if you didn't have that, actually, I mean, I did a podcast recently with a couple of guys. One's a Harrier pilot, a former Harrier pilot. One was a Tornado pilot,
Hmm.
and both of them are pretty senior by the time they finished. And we were talking a little bit about this, where the two-seat thing took work, to actually develop the relationship you needed with, because obviously you're trying to build a relationship with whoever's in the back, who literally their life was in your hands if you're the pilot.
Yes.
But at the same time, you need them to do the job properly, and obviously building that over time, and then having that constituted crew thing. I think you're quite right. I mean, you had a very, very strong relationship, which when it got broken because someone was posted or was whatever, for whatever reason, it was very difficult. And even
Yeah.
going back, and when I did, because I did it obviously with Nick Anderson, who works on your show as well, the podcast with Colin Bell, and he talked about that in
Hmm.
the World War II, flying
Hmm.
with the same navigator. I think it made the world of difference that he had, an
Oh yeah.
individual who he knew, who trusted him, and they were completely kind of connected in what they did, which was really, really important. We could talk for hours on this
I
stuff.
know. Already have.
And I think we've already talked for quite a long time. There are a couple of things
I
I do
warned
want to.
you. I warned you, Bob.
No, it's great. I mean, I think we need a part two, Jeff, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
There are a couple of things I do think are worth just touching on as well, because the other area
Sure.
I'm really interested in with what you've done, I touched on at the very beginning with podcasting. I mean, you
Oh yeah.
started podcasting 20 odd years ago. I mean, when nobody was podcasting. So I'm just really interested in your podcasting journey, what you've seen, in terms of the kind of changes over time, etc.
Well, what I will say is that what I've seen in that have made a significant difference, especially very recently, is the technology. Well, back in the early days, all the and this is one of the reasons why I started podcasting is because I wanted to play with all this equipment. The interfaces and the plug-in filters when you're doing the editing, and then microphones and all the tech, all the gadgetry. That it's like, oh, these are toys for me, and I get to I want to be able to play with these toys. But you had to back in the day, you had to kind of almost reverse engineer things and really figure things out on your own, or find people that have done it, have a little experience with it, and learn from them, or listen to shows about podcasting. A podcast about podcasting. Cliff Ravenscraft, the podcast Answer Man. He's still a friend of mine, and he's just a major influence in the world of podcasting. There are several others out there as well, Mike Dell and several others. I know if any of them are listening to me right now, probably not, but I'd hate to miss anybody from the early days of and continuing to be involved in podcasting. But the point I'm trying to make is the fact that now these platforms have made it so much easier, almost turnkey, for somebody to come in and just sit down and focus on what it is, the reason that they want to do a podcast. Now, the reason could be, I want to quit my regular job that I hate, and I want to this is my new job, and this is how I'm going to provide for my family and everything else. Well, I have news for people out there that are thinking that that's something they could do. And like we were talking earlier about, we all want to be studio musicians and make the big bucks and only work, Monday through Friday, and never work past 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, very few musicians, even really, really good musicians, can do that, right? They can't get to that kind of primo job. Very, very, very few, I think even a much smaller number of people can be very successful in becoming their replacement job as being a podcaster. I mean, sure, you can make some money here and there. I mean, I get contributions, kind of like National Public Radio over here, and the people that support public radio, or because they love what you're doing and they want to encourage you, and they want to give you value back from the value that they're receiving, because they know you're working hard and all that kind of stuff. That's great, but
It's pocket
you're
money.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
pocket money, right? That's in my opinion, and I don't fault people that go into it because of the money, but I don't know. I think you're chasing. I don't know what the metaphor should be, but you're chasing something that's almost unobtainable. You should, and I also say that the reason that I actually started podcasting wasn't altruistic at all. It wasn't because I had a passion in aviation. I mean, I do, but it wasn't the reason that I started the podcast. As I just mentioned, the reason why was because I wanted to play with all the toys and the gadgets and everything else. And I'm very blessed that it turned into something that made me turn back inward on myself and realize, oh, what you're doing, even though the initial reason for it was to play, what you're doing now, especially when the community started getting built around it. And I thought, oh, what I'm doing and what now I'm doing with my fellow co-hosts is very, very important. I can't tell you how many times people have written in saying, like during COVID or during this downturn in the economy and the airlines were furloughing and I lost my people, like it almost makes you want to cry when you're reading these letters from people saying how much what you're doing means to them or meant to
Hmm.
them. And you go, wow. It really makes you kind of take a couple of steps back and go, oh, I didn't realize I was having this kind of an effect on somebody, and I really need to start paying attention to what I'm saying and not being so flippant about things. This is serious business for some people that are listeners out there, and it's such a, and so what I'll tell people is that, hey, I'm interested in starting a podcast, and then I'll try to dissuade them. If it's for the money, but if it's something that they have a message that they want people to hear. They have a mission like you have with leadership to do you see that there's a need for that out there. That's the reason why you do a podcast. And the way that the platforms have advanced in technologies and making it so much easier now for people to do this is like the big win out there. I mean, if you are doing this for the right reason, it's almost, well, not, it's almost, trouble free, or it's almost like you don't have to really think too much about all the stuff in the background and all the other stuff that we had to worry about in the early days.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, I think I completely agree with all of that, actually. I think it's starting mine 2 years ago. I mean, the technology is obviously pretty similar now to what it was then, and
Hmm.
it allows you to do an awful lot. I mean, it does take, I think the other thing that I probably hadn't quite appreciated when I first started it, and my wife reminds me about very regularly, is it takes an awful lot of time.
Yes.
If you're going to produce anything resembling a professional product, then it's not just about the recording; it's about the pre stuff to get the right people on and to have the question sets right, and that's just the sort of the start of it, really. Then the editing piece is quite protracted to make it right.
Hmm.
And you do need to give that some thought, because I totally agree with you. I mean, I think it's in monetary terms, if you're really lucky and you're one of these ones that goes massively viral, and I was listening to somebody the other day that it was an interview with Anthony Scaramucci,
Hmm.
who's obviously on The Rest Is Politics USA, which they were talking
Hmm.
about. They get 9 million downloads a month. I'm going with
Oh, wow.
I mean,
Wow.
that would be nice,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
so
there's one of the handful of people that are making, good money for
yeah, and of
doing a
course you then get
podcast, right?
sponsors and adverts and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff if you want to do that. But I mean, yeah, no, it's fascinating, I mean, I really applaud you with what you've done, because you've transitioned through various iterations of the aviation side into what you've now got with the Airline Pilot Guy show, and it's a great fun show,
Hmm.
with some really good people talking about some really serious stuff. I mean, I think you're raising a lot of important and interesting issues, both for the airline community and actually for the general aviation community, and obviously it covers both
Yep.
angles, really. And so that's you were definitely in the public service space with that. That's for sure.
Yeah. And what's really cool about it is the fact that the way I look at it now, I know that it's important what we're doing, but I get to hang out with my really, really good friends, very accomplished, successful, sharp people. Look at any of my co-hosts, and it's just the quality level is just amazing, and and surrounding yourself with that kind of quality just naturally is going to make the show successful. But we also try to have a lot of fun. We try to make it entertaining. It's like me hanging out with my friends each and every week, and not only with my friends who are co-hosts, but we also record the show live. We use a platform that's video and audio, kind of much like what we're doing here on Zoom. But we have a community that shows up each and every week, and that almost takes on a life of its own sometimes. But it's nice because it's like they are like your chat GPT. It's like people out there with amazing experience in the world of aviation who are helping us and straightening us out. I mean, one of my fun things to say is, we are always shooting for 50% accuracy. That 50% bar, which is actually kind of a brilliant thing that I kind of just stumbled upon. I don't know, several years ago, because it now means that if we do say something that's not quite right, and we try to be sure that we are warning people that, well, this is not really in our wheelhouse. We're not sure, that we're not experts, but you know, that if you hear something that we are saying that it hasn't met the 50% bar, please let us know. Be part of this. So bringing in the community as part of the show has been a winning strategy, I think, for the Airline Pilot Guide shows. The community is just as much or more a part of the success of the
Oh, I
show.
totally agree. I mean, having been in the live audience just a few times, it is a lot of fun, and I mean, there's sometimes it's slightly weird times of the day and night for us Brits,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's we're all over the place with recording times and everything else.
yeah,
So
that's the
it's
way of the
tough.
world,
That's
isn't it?
hard. The hard thing when you're working with guests, or I mean not guests, but with co-hosts and the schedules and living all across the world. It's tough sometimes. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Hey, two more questions. The
yeah.
brief ones. What's the most memorable event of your career? You talked about your high
Hmm.
point moving into the left hand seat, but what's the most memorable thing that's ever happened to you?
Oh my gosh, so many. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me this question because I'm not sure how to answer it, honestly. There are so many things that I've been involved in and with in my career, especially well in the Air Force. All the amazing places I got to see in this world, and different cultures and different living conditions, which really makes me appreciate what we have in the US and the UK, as far as what our living standards are
Oh
compared to
yeah.
some living standards around this world that are just amazingly subpar, just to put it lightly. But I think that probably the most rewarding thing that I've experienced is when occasionally we have the opportunity to have the remains of a soldier that was either killed in action or was actively involved in the military. And especially Delta, and I think a lot of the airlines do this as well, but I don't know if anybody does it as well as Delta as far as our honor squad is concerned. When we know that we have soldiers' remains on board the aircraft and we're taking it from Atlanta to Chicago or whatever. The day or two before, usually before I even start my trip, I'll get a call from somebody in management that will say, Jeff, just giving you a heads up, this is what's scheduled for your flight on day 2 of your trip from Atlanta to Chicago O'Hare. And then, they give me some information about the person and what the circumstances were. Not sometimes it's very incomplete information, and sometimes I have to try to find some of this information on my own through the internet. The internet is a wonderful thing. Um, but the crews that volunteer to do this kind of coordination, the ramp crews, they have a special like a system, like a what do you call like the bag cart things, but they make it look really nice. It's specially decorated in patriotic colors, and really make it special for the soldier's casket or remains or whatever to be transferred from flight to flight and that kind of thing. And then they're usually with some kind of a oh, what do you call it? An officer or an enlisted person who is in charge of
Escort. Yeah,
escorting. Thank you,
yeah.
escort. That was the word I was looking for. I need more coffee. And so I always make as big a deal of it as I can when I'm traveling. And the nice thing is that the passengers almost every single time don't have any problem at all with talking about what is happening and honoring the person and like staying in their seats and allowing the military escort to exit the airplane first because they have to go down onto the ramp and help with the coordination of the transfer of the casket and that kind of thing. Um, but the thing that is, and that's rewarding, and it's always that solemn respect that you see from the everyday passengers in the back and participating and understanding the importance of it. But I remember the thing that really hit me the hardest was rolling onto the ramp in Chicago O'Hare. There's a reason why I keep using that as an example. Um, I had made an announcement about the person that we were carrying, the remains, etc. But I didn't realize that the local the fire department, the police, so many people there were so many lights flashing in the distance, that I thought, wow, something really has gone horribly wrong over there. It looks like an accident site.
That was for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we got closer, we went, oh crap. And then everybody just standing there and saluting and everything else is, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty emotional. I
Touching.
totally get that. I think when I was in Afghanistan as the commander in Kandahar airfield for 9 months in 2008, I had the honor, sad honor of standing on the ramp for the ramp ceremonies when we loaded Americans, Canadians, Brits. That was the majority. We had the odd other nation as well, but the vast majority were those where we were putting bodies on airplanes. And
yeah,
I mean, you got to do it right. You have to do it right, and I think that is something we do really well. I have to say, one of the things I think is fantastic on your side of the Atlantic is your treatment of veterans now. And I know it hasn't always been that way, and I know the legacy's been difficult. But I mean, I think when you look at your approach to whether you're still serving or in your active duty or whether you've retired now, I mean, it is fabulous. I mean, I found that even as a Brit going over to the States, that you get such amazing, thank you for your service as the kind of minimum approach, and lots and lots of things that happen. I've got some funny stories of things going on when I've been given stuff, and you go, whoa, it's just that is extraordinary. And we got a microcosm of that this side, but is not the same at all. It's very, very different with you, and I think you guys do that tremendously well, which I think is lovely, because it is important, and it really matters to anyone that's wearing a uniform, for sure, that they get that kind of recognition. I was going to ask you another question. I'm not going to do that because actually that's a lovely way to finish, and I do want to do a part 2 because there's a whole bunch of stuff we haven't talked about. I mean, not least full-time RV living for a while, all this sort of stuff. I think there's so many really interesting facets of Jeff Nielsen that we should come back and do a part 2 if you're up for that at some point.
Absolutely. Talking with a good friend, as I said, it's too bad we're not doing this at a pub and having a few beers while we're talking as well.
One of these days we should do that. But Jeff, thank you very, very much indeed. I really appreciate your time. Yeah.
It's been all my pleasure, Bob, and I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks very much indeed. Take care. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode with Jeff Nielsen. It was fun making it. We really enjoyed it. We actually spent way too much time talking about flying. I know that. And we'll definitely come back and do a bit of a part 2 on some other aspects that I want to get to with him as well. As I said, if you are interested in his podcast, I'll put the details in the show notes because I think it's a great show to listen to. And as he mentioned, he's been doing it a long time. He's been podcasting for 20 years, which is kind of before anybody knew what podcasts really were. So that's a significant thing. If you liked it, please share it, please repost it, please push it around your own networks to get people more visibility on it. Please like and subscribe and do all those sorts of things so you get to listen to more of the content on this channel as well. That would be really, really helpful. And if you find it valuable, then please think about giving me back some value for that as well, and financially contributing to the show. And you can do that by going to the support the show link in the podcast platform you're listening on. Or if you're on YouTube, then go to www.patreon.com/leadingforlife. The link is in the show notes, and you'll be able to sign up there as either a supporter, a champion, or a patron of the show. And frankly, for the price of a cup of coffee from any branded outlet, you'll be able to make a real difference to me on a monthly basis in terms of what we're doing to keep the podcast going. So that will be hugely appreciated if you don't mind doing that. But either way, I'm delighted to have you listening to the show or watching the show if you're on YouTube. Thank you very much indeed, and I'll be back soon with more great content. Speak soon. Bye.